So I wanted to give this a couple days to stew before I got into it because there's always the fallout, and the fallout's where things get fun. So in the case of Timothy Thibault, who was, let's say, voluntarily retired from the FBI last Friday, the story broke on Monday. There's a little bit to get into with this. Now, the two things that came up that made me think that this story probably has a little bit to it is a couple days ago, Merrick Garland came out and said two things. The first was that political appointees are banned from participating in political campaign events. The second thing that Merrick Garland put out was a memo that said that employees of the DOJ are banned from interacting with members of Congress. Essentially, a backhanded way of saying do not leak information to Congress. So, on top of Timothy Thibault being, well, voluntarily retiring, the other thing that came out was yesterday. Timothy Thibault's attorney released a statement that said that he voluntarily retired from the FBI after 25 years of service. This was not negotiated. This was not out of duress. This was not as part of some quid pro quo, because that was what was talked about in the media on Monday. Was he was resigned, or he resigned instead of being investigated or instead of being fired. Thibault's coming out and saying that that didn't happen, and it looks suspiciously like there was some type of backdoor negotiation, or excuse me, backroom negotiation when it comes to this, because it's just very coincidental. Because Timothy Thibault, the special or assistant special agent in charge at the FBI, at the Washington field office, he was mentioned in a letter by Senator Chuck Grassley back in May about his political partisanship. And then supposedly in July he was relieved of his duties for the FBI, and then he voluntarily resigned on Friday, and he was walked out of the building by two close friends. That's his statement. It's all very hanky in lieu of Mark Zuckerberg coming out and saying that someone at the FBI contacted Facebook and said, "Hey, please spike the Hunter Biden laptop," which Thibault was alleged to have been involved with the conspiracy alleged by whistleblowers that he dumped the investigation and was told everybody, do not look into the laptop at all. We don't want to influence another election by influencing another election. So that's what's going on behind this, which I find interesting. The other thing there's two other things that Timothy Thibault is allegedly connected to. The first was that he may have been involved with juking the stats on domestic terrorism, meaning he's trying to make more domestic terrorism numbers than there really are. And then the final thing that this isn't alleged, he was the tip of the spear when it came to the FBI DOJ's 2020 election fraud team for the FBI. So we put this all together, we put it in a pot, and we stir it together because these are a lot of FBI black eyes. And as I was talking to my co-host a little bit about this last night, like, some of it is not particularly interesting if you're not following along, because of course at this point we know the FBI is politically compromised. They've always been politically compromised, as far back as J. Edgar Hoover. So it just becomes an issue of what level of political partisanship has been going on at the FBI at any particular stage, that obviously has ramifications to higher level decision making that's going on, i.e. fixing elections in this case. So with Timothy Thibault, with the questions coming up with who made the phone call to Facebook to spike the Hunter laptop story, who at the White House has been interacting with these social media platforms in regards to censoring information that's out there. There's a lot of questions to be asked, and in particular with a guy like Timothy Thibault, when Senator Chuck Grassley decided that he was going to name him in his letter from whistleblowers within the DOJ, FBI, saying that there's political partisanship going on. The issue with Timothy Thibault is there are some very concerning uh, things that he did on social media in a official or quasi-official capacity, that even Christopher Wray, who is the director of the FBI, said is concerning. In particular, like anti-Trump statements or anti-Republican conservative likes on tweets. It's some of it is not as it could be viewed as slightly innocuous, but other of it is definitely concerning that you have an FBI agent that is participating in any particular way in partisan activities. So the bigger issue, why this is a bigger issue than is even being particularly put out there, is a guy like Timothy Thibault is either uh, manipulated or developed as a partisan asset while he's an FBI agent, or he comes in the door day one and he's already politically biased when he leaves college. And either or has larger ramifications, because I was actually talking to another one of my friends who's former law enforcement, and the problem with dirty cops or biased law enforcement is that you have to reopen the books and look at everything that they've ever touched, because you don't know when the corruption began. It didn't start for Timothy Thibault in May when there was a whistleblower that sent information to Senator Grassley. It starts before that. So if he was politically compromised in 2012 under the Obama administration, you have to go, well, what was he attached to? What was he doing? What was he able to manipulate the outcome of as a political fixer for partisan politics? Because at this point, there doesn't have to be the statement of alleged when it comes to Timothy Thibault, because we have a sitting senator and whistleblower saying that this guy was politically bent. We actually have his social media content saying that there is a political bias going on with him. So it just becomes, at what level it was a conscious bias that was affecting outcomes of investigations, or what was an unconscious bias that was affecting the outcome of investigations, and how far back it goes. When he was a 5-year-old FBI agent, like a fledgling FBI agent, what was he doing at that time that was being influenced by his bias, as opposed to a 15-year veteran, like I said, underneath Obama administration, that had its own political partisanship going on? What was he influencing, as to the point of 2020, when he's in charge of election fraud, or a major part of election fraud in the U.S. We have the question of, well, what was he influencing then? Because if he was politically biased enough in 2020 to be named as part of a whistleblower, he was probably pretty politically biased in 2020. And that's where the bigger problem behind this goes, is at what point do the black eyes stop coming? At what point does the political partisanship that caused Merrick Garland to turn around and prohibit appointed officials from participating in political campaign events, at what point can we go back with a guy like Timothy Thibault and go, well, where were you doing the things that you shouldn't have been doing? Were you, how much were you involved with something like Russiagate, or more accurately, things that we don't know about, like Russiagate? Because at this point, with the Russiagate and the PIS dossier, we know that that was a little bent, or more than a little bent, and there was corruption and bias involved with that, up to and including a conviction of a DOJ lawyer. So it just becomes like, hey, can we open the books and see how biased this guy was? And he's not the only agent, and how he got developed, how the bosses at the FBI continued to sign off on his activities. Were they aware that he was biased, or were they just so incompetent that they did not know he was biased at that point? So this goes back, obviously at this point we can talk about decades, and who he was rubbing elbows with, what influence that he was being corrupted by, because he likely was not just acting on his own. And either he was a rogue agent within the FBI, which is something the Obama administration liked to say about the IRS scandal targeting conservatives, or in some way, shape, or form, he was being told, directed how to use this bias in a particular manner. That's the bigger issue with Thibault. It is not just that he was walked out of the building with by FBI agents on Friday. It's how far back do we need to go to know uh, what what his activities were and how they were influenced by his political partisanship, and how the FBI is allowing someone to get to a rather high supervisory role that is this biased, and more than likely someone like this is being selected for their bias in order to promote, because they will be very agreeable to particular outcomes, either consciously or subconsciously, at the end of the day, because from a system of hierarchy, you're selecting people that will do what you want done, not necessarily do what is the right thing to do. And Timothy Thibault didn't get to the position that he was in the FBI, spearheading the 2020 elections, or being able to juke terrorism stats, or spiking the Hunter laptop or Hunter Biden laptop, without some type of complicit behavior by superiors. And that goes back, like I said, decades. So anyway, that's about all I have to say on this one, and I hope, yeah, you liked it.